about Daniel 9, verses 24 through 27. It's about the 70 weeks are determined upon your city. And this is a very simple breakdown. I'm just going to do it word for word. This is written by Minor Perkins and illustrated by L. Perkins. Minor wrote this book, calculating the last 7. So this is a free download, and you can go on the link below and just download it. It made so much sense to me. I was like, what? So all these believers over all this time is trying to crack this code, this 70 weeks of Daniel code. And this timeline makes so much sense to me. So I just want you to stay tuned and go through it with me, and I'll just hand it over to this cartoon. Okay, so this is called Daniel's Sign. In the first year of King Darius, way back in ancient times, in a country called Babylon, there lived a man by the name of Daniel who loved God. Daniel loved God so much that even when he was thrown into the lion's den, he did not stop loving God. One day, God gave Daniel a vision. A vision is when God puts a very clear picture of something in front of your eyes, like a movie screen or a computer screen image. Daniel did not write down the vision that he saw, but he did write down very carefully the exact words that the messenger angel spoke to him. And since the messenger spoke in Hebrew, this is what Daniel wrote. This is Daniel 9:24 through 27 in Hebrew. This is copied from the oldest complete copy of the Old Testament in Hebrew in Leningrad Codex from the year 1008. What does it mean in English? So this is a literal translation by Minor Perkins from the Hebrew. 77s are cut out upon your people and upon your set-apart city to restrain rebellion and to seal sin and to cover perversion and to bring eternal righteousness and to seal vision and prophet and to anoint the set-apart of set-aparts. And know and understand from the going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah Prince are 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Again, and are built street, trench, bossed wall, but in distressing of times. And after the 62 sevens, Messiah is cut off and has nothing for himself. And the city and the set-apart place are destroyed by the people of the prince who comes, and the end is in a flood. And until the end, war is decided, desolations, and he strengthens the covenant for many 1 week. And in the middle of the week, he brings to rest sacrifice and offering. And upon the wing of disgusting idols desolating, and upon complete destruction, and what is decided is poured out upon the desolate. So that is a literal Hebrew study of Daniel 9:24 through 27. Have you ever heard of how spies use secret codes? Did you know God also uses secret codes sometimes? God and Daniel often spoke in secret code. And now God was giving Daniel a secret code, telling him when Messiah will come. When God created the universe and the earth, he also created time and several ways to count time. He created the earth orbiting the sun as one hand of his giant clock to count years, and he created the moon orbiting the earth as another hand of his giant clock to count months. And he created the earth to spin in his giant clock to count days. But what are the sevens? What kind of counting is this? What kind of time counting is this? How do we know when this verse has been fulfilled? How will we know when Messiah comes? Can you crack the code and see what God is saying to Daniel? Daniel 22 tells us he reveals deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. The universe and the earth, he also created the first week. He counted 7 days, and then he decided it was a good time to start counting again from the beginning and counted a new 7 days. We've been counting days and weeks like this ever since. But what if God counts other things in groups of sevens too? Maybe God counts in sevens like we count in dozens. 1 dozen is 12. 1 7 is 7. Now let's look at the sevens that are in their time code that God gave to Daniel. There is 1 7. There are 7 sevens. And there are 62 sevens. And there are 7 sevens plus 62 sevens. So those are the 62 sevens lumped with the 7 sevens, which makes 69 sevens. And there are 70 sevens. So there's the 69 sevens plus the last 7. That makes the 70 sevens. Those are described in Daniel, which we just read. So if God counts in sevens like we count in dozens, and sevens can count days, weeks, months, or years, you can have sevens of days, sevens of weeks, sevens of months, sevens of years, and you could have 77s of days, 77s of weeks, 77s of months, and 77s of years. 70 dozens is the same as multiplying 70 times 12, which equals 840. 77s is the same as multiplying 70 times 7, which equals 490. This means that 77s of days is 490 days, 77s of weeks is 490 weeks, 77s of months is 490 months, and 77s of years is 490 years. So in the time code God gave Daniel, the 77s can be a total of 490 days or weeks or 490 months or 490 years. Now that we know what sevens are, let's look at the time code God gave again. 77s are cut out upon your people and upon your set-apart city. So God cut those 77s out at the time from the beginning to the end. To restrain rebellion, to seal sin, to cover perversion, which is a fancy word for when we do things that hurt God, to bring eternal righteousness, and to seal vision and profit. And to anoint the set apart of set aparts. And know and understand from the going forth of the word to restore and to build Jerusalem. Go rebuild Jerusalem. Until Messiah Prince are 7 sevens and 62 sevens. This is like saying from the going forth of the word to build a wall of blocks, go build that wall. Until dinner time are 7 hours. Again in our built, street and trench, bossed wall, but in distressing of times. So we know that Jerusalem's never been peaceful. It's a little cute drawing showing that. And after 62 sevens, Messiah is cut off and has nothing for himself. And the city and the set-apart place are destroyed by the people of the prince who comes. That's Jerusalem. And the end is in a flood. And until the end, war is decided. Desolations. And he strengthens the covenant for many 1 week. A covenant is a promise or agreement. So this has been just going through the verse by verse with little illustrations just to give you an idea of what Daniel might have been talking about. And in the middle of the week, he brings to rest sacrifice and offering. The Lord brings to rest sacrifice and offering. There's also a layering of the 7 with the 7 last week of Jesus' life, the week of the crucifixion, but I'll talk about that in another time. And upon the wing of disgusting idols desolating. So we don't really know what that means. Not going into that here. Until complete destruction and what is decided is poured out upon the desolate. Daniel's time code mentions a word going forth to rebuild Jerusalem. Has this ever happened? Yes. In 458 BC, 63 years after God gave Daniel this time code, King Artaxerxes ordered and sent forth the word that Jerusalem was to be rebuilt. And that was in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah when they were building the walls of Jerusalem. So what happens 7 sevens and 62 sevens after this date? Yeshua, the Messiah, came and was cut off and had nothing for himself, and spiritually brought to rest the sacrifice and offering. But the physical sacrifice and offering was not brought to rest at this time. 9 weeks from Daniel's prophecy, from the building of the walls of Jerusalem, Messiah came. Now, I think a lot of people know this, and then we've all been waiting for the last 7, this huge gap from that point. But I think the next part is what's so significant to me, and I think it's a real cracking of this code. So stay tuned, because our Messiah came once, and he's going to come again. So it would make sense that the 69 sevens wouldn't happen just once. After 40 years, the Messiah was cut off, the city Jerusalem and the set-apart place, Herod's temple, were destroyed, and sacrifice and offering were physically brought to rest. Yeshua came and fulfilled many, many prophecies that God had given to his people. But then Yeshua did something totally shocking. He said he was going to leave and be gone for a little while, but he promised he would come back and finish fulfilling all of the prophecies God had given his people. And he promised there would be a big wedding and that everyone who loved him would be invited. So since Yeshua did not finish all that he was planning to do the first time he came, maybe there is a part of this time code that shows us his plans for when he returns as well. But has anyone besides King Artaxerxes ever ordered that Jerusalem be rebuilt? And this is the cracking of the code that I think is so cool. Yes, sometime between the years 1534 and 1535, King Suleiman sent forth the word for Jerusalem to be restored and rebuilt. Go build the walls of Jerusalem. And the walls he built around Jerusalem are standing to this day. And even more incredibly, 62 sevens, 434 years later, in the year 1968, the new Israeli government ordered that Jerusalem be restored and built even more. Let's rebuild Jerusalem. The government of Israel decrees. So we had 7 sevens before, after the first building of Jerusalem, and then we had the 62 sevens. Now we have the 62 sevens after King Solomon says rebuild Jerusalem. And that leads us to the year 1968. So we know in the 6-day war that the Jews took back Jerusalem. And I've said in my videos about Luke 21, where that signified the time of the Gentiles has been fulfilled. So I find it really interesting that 1968, when the government ordered Jerusalem be restored and rebuilt, even more, that would be the start of then the second 7 sevens. So even more incredibly, 7 sevens, 49 years later, in the year 2017, the new American administration announced they were officially moving their embassy to Jerusalem, and the two world powers, Russia and America, officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. So we have 62 sevens, and now to where they have Jerusalem, and now 7 sevens, 2017, which if you watch my 2017 video, you will find out all the prophetic signs and fulfillment in 2017. Not only that it was 69 sevens from the rebuilding of the temple by Solomon. I mean, you can't deny these numbers. You just can't deny these numbers, guys. But there's still one more 7 left in the time code to reach 77s. What will happen in the 7 years after 2017? If the time code God gave Daniel reveals not only when Yeshua would come first, but also when he will be coming again, maybe something very amazing will happen 7 years after 2017 at the completion of 77s since King Solomon first ordered Jerusalem to be rebuilt. So you can see by this timeline again how important 2017 is. And are we in the last 7? I really believe we are. And at the end of that 7, the real temple is with us. Jesus, the temple, will be with us. So extra, read all about it. An illustration of the time code. So this was just a little analogy parable that I think is really cool. And so one day God decides that he's going to grow a garden, and he wants to tell you how he's going to do it, but he really loves giving you time codes to solve. So when he tells you about his plans, he says, I'm going to set aside 70 days to plant my garden and to harvest my garden. It sounds like he is planning to grow and harvest a garden in 70 days, doesn't it? And so you're sure you've solved the time code. Like I said, a lot of people believe that those 69 sevens happened before Messiah came. But a lot of people don't understand the next part. The next day you watch him and begin his garden. He plants and he plants and he plants, and suddenly you realize 69 days have flown by. But all that he has done is plant his garden. Now he only has 1 day left to harvest his garden before 70 days are finished. The next morning you rush to the window, sure you will find him finishing all of his plans and doing a great big harvest, but no, he's still planting. So now you're curious, and you watch carefully what he does next. The next day he begins to water his seeds, and he waters and waters and waters. So many days have gone by now that you have lost count when you suddenly see the seeds have grown into great, big, huge plants. And one day you look over and see that he has begun to harvest. You mark the day on your calendar, thinking it must be a clue to understanding the time code he's giving you. And he harvests and harvests and harvests until he's filled his whole house with wonderful food. Then he puts away his tools, closes the shed, and he has stopped harvesting. You look at your calendar, and it's the 70th day since he first began to harvest. Suddenly it all makes sense. You have cracked the time code. So this little parable is about when he said, I'm going to set aside 70 days to plant and to harvest. He was saying, I'm going to set aside 70 days to plant and 70 days to harvest. So I just think that's really a good way to think about it. So it's a mystery of his first coming and second coming. And he would put the mystery of the 70 weeks of Daniel into the first coming and into the second coming. He added in the extra mystery of the unknown time he had set aside to water his garden in between the 70 days of planting and 70 days of harvesting. So God's time code, a summary of the different parts of Daniel 9 as they happened in history. But instead of a time code for planting a garden, God gave Daniel a time code for the coming of the Messiah and the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of sin and evil. And instead of setting aside 70 days, God set aside 70 sevens, as well as 7 sevens and 62 sevens. And after 62 weeks, and 1 week, and in the middle of the week, now let's look at how these are fulfilled in history in several ways. So if you want to look at Miner's book, Calculating the Last Seven, he talks about the layering of sevens, like the Lord is fulfilled his timeline in 77s, several different times. This week, 70 weeks being the significant one to count to the end. But there were also the timeline of Jesus being here and his ministry, and then the week of his crucifixion being a significant 7. So now we understand from the going forth of the word to restore and to build Jerusalem until Messiah Prince are 7 sevens and 62 sevens, and again are built street, trench, boss wall, but in distressing of times. So we just went through this. The first command to build the temple by Artaxerxes in 458. There were 7 years and 62 sevens of years when Jesus came. So that's amazing. And after 62 sevens, Messiah is cut off and has nothing for himself. And he strengthens a covenant for many 1 week. And in the middle of the week, he brings to rest sacrifices and offerings. So, but we're going back to the second set of 69 weeks leading to the 70th week, when signifying the Lord's return. So the end is in a flood, and until the end, war is decided in desolations, and he strengthens a covenant for many 1 week. That was in 2017. He began to strengthen his covenant with many for 1 week, and I really felt it, and that's why this makes so much sense to me, because when the 2017 Revelation 20:12 sign happened, I could just feel the Lord strengthening his covenant with me. I mean, I could just feel it, and I felt more and more strengthened. I was asking Miner, how come other people aren't teaching this? And I guess there were a bunch of people, maybe about 10, who are scholars and decided all as well. They tracked the 69 weeks from Solomon's command to rebuild Jerusalem. And they also came on the year 2017, but they thought that the rapture was going to happen. And because they believed the pre-tribulation rapture lie, so that lie has deceived many and is still deceiving many. So because they believed that and they didn't get raptured in 2017, they thought the last 7 years hadn't started. But it did start. It started quietly, but not that quietly. I mean, the Revelation 12 sign, like, hello, I was totally listening. I was totally paying attention to that. You can't make that stuff up. So there is also another person who believes this timeline, and I'll put a link to him. His name's Brother Cliff. And then there is another brother who believes that the last 7 is starting 2019, just by the way he calculated starting, I think, when Solomon's temple had, or not his temple, but the walls of Jerusalem had begun. I don't know all of that, but I'll put his link in here because I think it's interesting. So, are we in the last 7? I mean, no man knows the day or hour, but why would the Lord give Daniel that time code without a way to understand it? And this to me makes a lot of sense. So I hope you'll look up links and download. All right, take care and tune in to my videos. Thank you for subscribing.